Hi guys, and welcome to Last Light Radio channel. Tonight we step into the grey hour before sunrise, when the air's cool, the ground is damp, and a whole day of labour is already waiting in the dark. You are not waking gently. You are being pulled from sleep by routine, by fear, by hunger, by the knowledge that being slow can cost more than comfort. What does a morning feel like when your body is counted as property? What happens to a person when work begins so early and ends so late that rest becomes a rumour? In 1750, for many black Americans living under slavery, the day starts long before the sun has the decency to show itself. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while you are here, comment with your location and local time. Now, dim the lights, and let the darkness around you become the darkness of a plantation morning, where the first sound is not birdsong, but the scrape of feet on packed earth. You rise from a sleeping place that does not quite deserve the word bed. It may be a rough pallet stuffed with straw, or a wooden platform with a blanket that smells faintly of smoke, sweat, and old dust. The air inside the cabin feels close and damp. Several bodies have spent the night in one room, and the warmth lingers, mixed with the scent of ash from yesterday's fire. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs. A child shifts in sleep. A board creaks under weight. You do not wake because you are refreshed. You wake because the day demands it. In many parts of British North America in 1750, slavery is already deeply tied to the economy, especially in colonies like Virginia, Maryland, South Carolina, and parts of North Carolina. Tobacco plantations in the Chesapeake and rice plantations in the lower South depend on forced labour. Enslaved men, women, and children are expected to begin early, often before dawn, because every usable hour is turned into profit for somebody else. The clock matters, but so does the season, the weather, and the crop. Nature sets one rhythm, ownership sets the harsher one. You sit up slowly, because even that movement can ache. Your back is stiff. Your hands still remember yesterday. The skin across your palms feels rough, hardened by tools, rope, wet leaves, wooden handles, and cold water. If you are young, your body can recover more quickly, though not kindly. If you're older, each morning arrives like a bill presented again. Outside, the sky is still thick with night. There may be a moon hanging low and pale, or cloud cover pressing everything into one dark mass. The ground under your feet is cool and gritty. In some quarters, there are no proper floors, only packed dirt. In others, the boards are uneven, splintered, and always draughty. You dress quickly because there is little to arrange. Clothing is often coarse linen or rough wool, simple and hard-wearing, meant for labour rather than comfort. The fabric scratches at the neck and wrists. Shoes may be poor quality, repaired again and again, or absent altogether in warmer months. The first sounds of the settlement drift through the dark in layers. A pot lid rattles. Someone whispers. A baby starts crying, then is hushed. Farther off, an animal snorts from a stable. Horses stamp. Dogs bark once, then stop. In some places a horn is blown. In others, a bell is rung, or an overseer simply appears with a voice sharp enough to slice the morning in two. You learn those sounds with terrible intimacy. They are not alarms. They are commands. Breakfast, if it comes before labour, is plain and quick. Cornmeal mush, a piece of bread, sometimes leftovers from the night before, sometimes very little at all. The smell of it is warm and faintly sweet, but never luxurious. Hunger is a regular companion, not a dramatic visitor. Your stomach knows how to shrink its expectations. Even so, the body cannot be tricked forever. Work in the fields or yards demands energy, and the food given is often not enough for the effort expected. That gap between labour and nourishment shapes the entire day. You step outside fully now, and the cold reaches your skin. Dew clings to grass and hems. In the Chesapeake, tobacco country can smell green, earthy, and bitter in season. In South Carolina low country, the air near rice fields carries moisture, mud, insects, and stagnant water. These places are beautiful in the way dangerous things often are. A pale mist may hover above the ground, softening fences and trees into shadow. For one brief moment, the world looks quiet, but quiet is not peace. You join the movement of others heading toward work. There is little idle talk. Speech at this hour is practical, guarded, or simply absent. You save your strength where you can. Some people carry tools. Some carry infants to leave with an older child or another woman assigned indoor tasks. Some straighten their shoulders as if preparing for battle, which in a sense they are. Only the battlefield is a ruru, a yard, a kitchen, a barn, a dock. Not every enslaved person in 1750 does the same work, and that matters. The labour system varies by colony, crop, and owner. On tobacco plantations, field labour can involve preparing soil, planting, weeding, worming the plants by hand, cutting, hanging, curing, and packing leaves. It is repetitive, dirty, and physically punishing. In rice regions, the work is even more notorious for disease and exhaustion, with standing water, heat, mosquitoes, and the constant threat of malaria. Some enslaved people work as carpenters, coopers, blacksmiths, boatmen, cooks, laundresses, nurses, seamstresses, or drivers forced to supervise others. Skill does not mean ease. Usually it means the owner can extract value from more parts of you. You feel that truth immediately. There is no part of the body that is not available for use. Hands lift, pull, tie, stir, scrub, cut, carry, legs cross wet ground, uneven furrows, kitchen thresholds blackened with soot. Eyes stay alert for orders, mistakes, weather, temper. Ears listen for footsteps that signal inspection. Even silence becomes work. You must measure it correctly. Too much silence looks sullen. Too much speech looks careless. Everyday life demands a kind of constant calculation that drains the mind as surely as labour drains the body. Historians know a great deal about plantation work from ledgers, letters, travel accounts, laws, and later recollections, but they still debate the exact rhythms of daily life on smaller farms, where records were sparse and routines changed with season and owner. That uncertainty matters, because slavery was not one uniform machine with identical gears everywhere. It was a system, yes, but also a patchwork of local habits, personal cruelties, economic pressures, and improvisations. The broad pattern is brutally clear. The details can shift from one place to the next. You arrive at the assigned task just as the horizon begins to lighten. The first line of dawn appears in a thin band, not warm yet, only grey and silver. Your breath is visible in cooler weather. In summer, the air may already feel heavy. Work begins before the sun climbs high because owners and overseers want the maximum number of working hours. Rest is a cost. They prefer profit. The overseer watches. Perhaps he is mounted. Perhaps he walks the rows with a stick or whip at his side, a visible reminder that force is the true manager here. Some plantations rely on gang labour, where groups work together under direct supervision from sun-up to sundown. Others use a task system, more common in some rice areas, where a person is assigned a specific amount of work for the day. Scholars often point out that task labour could sometimes allow small pockets of personal time after completion. But nobody should mistake that for freedom. It is still labour extracted through ownership and threat. Your own body learns to track time not by a clock face, but by sensation. The morning begins cold and stiff, then the muscles warm through effort, then sweat appears under the arms, across the spine, along the hairline. Dirt sticks to damp skin. Your shoulders start to burn, light grows stronger. The day opens fully. By then you are already tired. There are small human details that survive in the historical record, and they make the past feel painfully near. Some enslaved people tucked away bits of cloth, shells, beads, or polished buttons as personal treasures. Archaeologists have found items in slave quarters that suggest private adornment, spiritual meaning, or simple attachment. One quirky and touching tidbit is that blue beads appear at some sites, and may have held protective or decorative significance for people drawing on African traditions blended with new circumstances in America. Even under crushing conditions, People still made room for beauty, luck, memory, or style. Human beings are rude that way. They keep being human. The morning does not soften, it stretches. You bend, lift, carry, repeat. Around you, the plantation wakes in layers. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Chickens scratch near cabins. A wagon wheel grinds over packed earth. Somewhere metal strikes metal in a smithy, each ring bright and hard in the cool air. A woman in the main house kitchen may already be kneading dough, hauling water, plucking fowl, or tending a hearth that sends heat against her face. A child may be set to chasing birds from newly planted rows, gathering chips for firewood, or rocking a smaller child with one foot while half asleep. Childhood exists here, but it is short, thin, and quickly recruited. And yet the senses remain alive. They do not disappear simply because suffering is ordinary. You smell wet soil freshly turned. You smell wood smoke caught in cloth. You smell animal manure near barns, river mud near fields, and the bitter green scent of tobacco leaves when bruised. You feel the rough handle of a hoe pressing into your palm, the sting of dew soaking your ankles, the grain of coarse fabric rubbing against skin already sore. The sky changes from slate to pearl to pale blue. Birds begin their morning calls with almost insulting cheer. Nature keeps no moral account. You keep moving because stopping carries risk. Collapse is not merely exhaustion. It can be interpreted as disobedience. A body under slavery is expected to perform beyond ordinary limits. Pregnant women often worked deep into pregnancy. Elderly people who could still be used were used. Children were drawn into labour early, first through errands and watching tasks, then through more sustained work as they grew. The line between able and exhausted meant very little when measured against an owner's expectations. There is a strange cruelty in how ordinary the scene can look from a distance. Fields, fences, trees, smoke curling into the morning, a house standing at the centre of an estate. To an outsider passing by, it could resemble order, productivity, even prosperity. But up close, the order is violence arranged neatly. The productivity is stolen life. The prosperity is built from a fatigue so constant that people must fold their hopes into the smallest corners of the day. By full sunrise, you're no longer waking. You're already deep inside the labour, with many hours still ahead. The day has barely begun, and your body understands the bargain imposed on it. Work until muscles tremble, work until the mouth goes dry. Work until thought narrows into motion. Work because refusal is dangerous. Work because survival sometimes depends on enduring one more hour, one more command, one more morning in the dark. This is how 1750 begins for countless black Americans held in bondage. Not with leisure, not with privacy, not with the simple dignity of choosing when to rise. It begins with forced motion, measured breath, empty stomach, sore limbs, and the hard knowledge that the sun is only now coming up, while your labour started long before anyone could admire the dawn. Morning has fully arrived, and with it comes the serious business of being used. The lofter darkness is gone now. In its place stands clear daylight, thin at first, then growing bright enough to show every row, every fence post, every stain on your sleeves. Whatever little mercy dawn pretended to offer has passed. The plantation is awake. That is unfortunate for you. You are sent where labour is needed most, which means your body belongs to the crop, the house, the yard, the stable, the workshop, or some shifting combination of all five. In 1750, enslaved black Americans are not simply field hands in one giant identical scene. Their work depends on region, season, wealth, and the imagination of the people claiming ownership over them. Some owners want tobacco moving efficiently from soil to curing barn. Others want kitchens running like clocks, though clocks usually get better treatment. Others want barrels, bricks, shingles, shoes, harnesses, or smooth horse tack. Everything useful must be produced, repaired, carried, or cleaned by someone. Very often, that someone is you. In the tobacco colonies, the plant rules nearly everything. Tobacco's demanding, fussy, and strangely delicate for a crop tied so tightly to brutal labour. It needs constant attention. You may spend hours breaking soil, pulling weeds, or checking the leaves for hornworms. That last task sounds almost harmless until you feel the sticky surface of the leaf against your fingers. Smell the bitter green odour rising from the plant, and notice how the worms cling fatly to the stems. You pluck them off by hand, again and again, a glamorous job if you happen to be an ambitious insect. The rows stretch in front of you with a maddening sameness. Dirt clings to your ankles, the sun climbs higher, sweat slips down your neck and gathers along your collarbone. The handle of a hoe becomes warm and slick from your grip. Each motion seems simple. Bend, pull, lift, step. But the punishment is in the repetition. Muscles do not protest all at once. They complain in layers. First the shoulders, then the lower back, then the thighs. By midday, the whole body has become one long argument against the task. Some plantations use gang labour, forcing groups of workers to move together at a pace set from above. This gives the overseer or driver a clear view of output, and it leaves little room to slow down. If one person falters, the whole line is affected. Pressure comes not only from those in power, but from the cruel structure itself. Nobody wants to be the reason attention sharpens. Nobody wants punishment sweeping through the group because work fell behind. So the rhythm becomes relentless. It is not natural rhythm, it is manufactured strain. In the low country of South Carolina and Georgia, rice work follows different demands. Rice cultivation is famous for its complexity, and owners often rely on knowledge that came from West and Central African farming traditions. This is one of the ugliest ironies in colonial America. Enslavers exploit the very expertise they pretend to despise. Rice fields must be diked, flooded, drained, planted, weeded, and harvested with care. The work is heavy, wet, and dangerous. Mud sucks at your feet. Water reflects the sky so brightly it hurts your eyes. Mosquitoes rise in whining clouds from standing water. The air smells of marsh, rot, and heated vegetation. Malaria and other fevers lurk in these places like unwelcome landlords. Some historians still argue over exactly how much specific African agricultural knowledge was consciously sought by enslavers in every case. But there is broad agreement that rice cultivation in the Lower South drew heavily on skills many enslaved Africans already possessed. That fact matters. It reminds you that forced labour did not rely only on brute strength. It also stole intelligence, memory, technique, and generations of practical experience. Not all labour happens in open fields. The yard has its own demands, and they never really end. You might haul water from a well or river, balancing buckets that cut into your fingers and pull at your shoulders. Water is needed for cooking, washing, brewing, cleaning, livestock, and people who believe water somehow carries itself. You may split wood for kitchen fires, drag logs, mend fences, clear brush, move stones, or shovel manure from stables. Yard work is forever multiplying. One task breeds another. Carry the bucket, scrub the pot, move the feed, clean the stall, fix the gate, then fix the hinge the gate pulled loose. Productivity on a plantation is like a hungry dog. It always wants one more thing. Domestic labour inside the main house brings a different kind of pressure. The rooms are cleaner, but the scrutiny is sharper. If you work indoors, you may rise early to light fires, sweep ashes, polish silver, brush coats, lace gowns, wash linen, prepare breakfast, carry chamber pots, scrub floors, or stand still for long periods while someone else pretends you are invisible. Household service can be physically draining and emotionally exhausting in ways outsiders often fail to understand. You must move carefully, quietly, efficiently, and with the correct expression. Too slow looks lazy, too quick looks careless, too cheerful invites suspicion, too solemn suggests attitude. It is theatre with penalties. The smells indoors are richer than those in the field, but not always pleasant. Rendered fat, onions, stale beer, soap lye, candle wax, damp wool, rosewater, smoke, wet laundry, old wood, and human waste all mingle in the same space. In the kitchen, heat presses against your cheeks from the hearth, Your hands smart from hot iron, rough water, and lye soap. A cook must remember times, textures, and ingredients while also watching for moods. Food can be a source of prestige for the household, which means mistakes are taken personally by people who think they are the centre of the universe. Colonial vanity is not restful. Skilled work carries prestige in account books, but not safety. Enslaved carpenters shape beams, repair roofs, and build outbuildings. Coopers make barrels essential for storing and shipping goods. Blacksmiths work in waves of heat, sparks flashing against dark walls while hammer blows ring across the yard. Seamstresses cut and stitch clothing for households that may never thank them. Boatmen ferry goods and passengers along rivers and coastal waters. Some skilled labourers move between properties or hire out under the direction of owners, generating income while living with the constant danger that useful talent makes them more valuable, not more secure. A blacksmith's space is unforgettable. The forge breathes heat like an animal. Charcoal dust settles on skin and clothes. Iron glows orange, then yellow, then dims again if you hesitate. The smell is sharp, mineral, smoky. Hammers strike in ringing bursts that vibrate through your teeth. You need strength, timing, and control. A poor strike can ruin the piece or injure the hand. There is craft here, real craft, and that may bring a sliver of pride. Yet pride must live beside coercion. The iron you shape is not proof of freedom. It is proof that your ability has been drafted into someone else's wealth. One quirky detail from plantation records and archaeological sites is that some enslaved artisans became known for very specific specialties, such as elegant joinery, fine brickwork, or expert coopering. Owners bragged about these skills the way people brag about a strong horse. The bragging itself tells a grim story. Excellence was noticed, even admired, but rarely honoured in any moral sense. Talent became another chain, polished and practical. Then there are the stables, where labour comes with hooves, flies, and the constant smell of hay mixed with dung. Horses require feeding, watering, brushing, mucking, saddling, and careful attention to health. Tack must be cleaned and repaired, harness leather needs oiling, hooves need checking, a frightened horse can crush your foot or kick without warning. Wealthy households prize their horses deeply, which means stable workers are trusted with valuable animals while not being trusted with their own lives. Colonial logic was a truly flexible creature. Children work too, not always with the heaviest tasks at first, but childhood under slavery is no protected garden. A young child may carry water, gather kindling, pick through scraps, chase birds from crops, fan flies from a table, or rock an infant while half grown and wholly tired. As strength increases, so do demands. Labour trains the body early. It also trains obedience, or tries to. Yet children, being children, still laugh sometimes, still whisper jokes, still invent games out of pebbles, sticks or bits of cloth, even here. The human spirit has the bad manners to keep flickering. You learn quickly that work is not only physical effort, it is performance under watch. You must show the right pace without appearing deliberately slow. You must avoid waste, avoid damage, avoid drawing blame for what weather or poor tools caused. You must anticipate what is wanted before it is spoken. Many enslaved people became experts in reading tone, posture, footsteps, and silence. That sensitivity was a survival skill. The body worked. The mind scanned. Both grew tired together. At times, you may receive a ration of spirits or extra food during harvest or intensive labour periods. Such gestures are not kindness. They are management. Owners understood enough about bodies to know that completely broken workers produce less. Some even kept careful lists of tools, output, and clothing distributions, measuring human beings in columns. The account book was one of slavery's favourite disguises. It made cruelty look organised. Around noon, the heat feels heavier, flattening sound and thought. The light turns hard and white. Fields shimmer, insects drone over weeds and puddles. Your shirt clings to your spine. Salt dries at your temples. A short pause for food may come, though not always generous or long. Cornbread, salted meat, peas, or whatever ration is available. You eat fast. The food tastes of smoke, grease, and hunger. Water may be warm already. A breeze passes and is gone before your skin can thank it. Then the afternoon begins, and somehow it asks for as much as the morning did. Hands that already ache must keep gripping. Legs that feel hollow keep moving. In the house, more laundry must be rinsed, wrung, and hauled. In the yard, more wood stacked, more troughs filled. In the workshop, more nails forged, more staves fitted, more boards planed smooth. On the river, more cargo loaded. There is no magical point where the body says, "Surely that is enough," and the system agrees. Enough is not part of the design. Scholars continue to debate how much autonomy certain skilled enslaved workers could negotiate in particular places, especially in urban areas or on plantations needing specialized labor. The records can be frustratingly thin, and they often preserve the owner's voice more clearly than the workers. But uncertainty about degrees of maneuver does not change the larger truth. Any room to bargain existed inside a violent system built to deny ownership of self. As the sun leans westward, the shadows lengthen across the ground, and the day takes on that late glow people now call beautiful in paintings and calendars. Out here, beauty does not cancel fatigue. Golden light lands on fence rails, tobacco leaves, wagon wheels, kitchen smoke, and sweating foreheads. A horse flicks its tail against flies. A woman carries a basket against her hip. A boy drags a split log through dust. A cooper taps a barrel hoop into place with practiced precision. The world glows softly while bodies harden through use. This is what daily labour in 1750 really means. Not one task, but many. Not one landscape, but several. Not one simple image of field work, but a whole economy of forced skill. Every polished table, cured leaf, mended roof, loaded boat, fed horse, and warm meal stands on unseen effort. You're expected to provide that effort until your limbs shake. Your focus blurs, and your strength narrows to whatever can be pulled from the last stubborn corner of yourself. By the time daylight begins to soften, you do not feel accomplished. You feel spent. There is a difference. Accomplishment belongs to the person who claims the result. Exhaustion belongs to you. By the time labour loosens its grip for a moment, your body has become a list of needs: food, water, dry cloth, a place to sit without being called idle, something soft against sore skin, something warm when the night turns sharp. In 1750, for most black Americans held in slavery, these needs are met poorly, irregularly, and always at somebody else's pleasure. Comfort is treated like a reward, though it is really just the minimum a body requires to keep going. Food comes first in your thoughts, because hunger has a loud voice. It does not shout all at once. It mutters, nags, and returns. The stomach tightens. The mouth feels empty even after swallowing. Work makes the body burn through what little it was given, and rations often fall well short of the effort demanded. On many plantations and farms, weekly allowances may include cornmeal, a small amount of pork or other salted meat, perhaps peas, molasses, or whatever else the owner thinks adequate. Adequate is a very suspicious word when spoken by someone who has never gone to bed hungry. Corn is everywhere in colonial foodways, and for enslaved people it often means mush, pone, ash cake, or coarse bread. You can smell it cooking over embers, a simple warm scent that should feel homely, yet usually carries the ache of insufficiency. The meal is gritty on the tongue. It fills the mouth quickly, but not always the body. Salt pork, when available, is heavy with brine and fat. It can be sliced into a pot with greens or beans, stretched across several meals, or eaten in small, careful bites. Sometimes fish appears, especially in coastal or river regions. Sometimes game is added through hunting, trapping, or fishing done quietly, cleverly, or with permission that can vanish at any time. One of the least dramatic truths of slavery is also one of the most important. People became experts at making little things last. A handful of meal, a bone with some flavour left, a pot of peas thinned with water, greens gathered from a patch near the quarters, sweet potatoes or yams if the region and soil allowed it. Enslaved families and communities often cultivated small garden plots when they could, raising vegetables to supplement rations. Those patches mattered deeply. They offered not just food, but a small claim on effort and knowledge that did not begin and end in the owner's ledger. You kneel by a cooking place near the cabin and smell wood smoke rising in slow blue threads. The fire catches at the nose and settles into cloth. Soot lives everywhere. It marks pots, hands, faces, and beams above the hearth. A black iron pot sits over coals, simmering something humble and precious. Greens collapse into themselves. Beans soften. Cornmeal thickens. Fat pops faintly at the edge. The sound is small but kind, after a day shaped by command. The quiet bubbling of food can feel almost tender. Still, tenderness does not remove strain. Food has to be stretched across mouths, and there are often many mouths. Children eat, adults eat, the old eat, the sick try to eat. A woman carrying a child needs more food than she is likely given. A boy in a growth spurt can swallow his portion and still look hollow. People trade, share, hide, save, and improvise. Sometimes food is stolen from a smokehouse or kitchen and carried away in secret, which owners describe as criminal but bodies describe as necessary. Historians agree that rations were often inadequate, but they still debate how much variation existed between regions and individual plantations. Since surviving records are inconsistent and frequently self-serving, owners like to record themselves as practical providers. Human beings are very talented at writing flattering lies about their own behaviour. The broader picture remains plain. Enslaved people were commonly underfed relative to the labour expected of them, and survival often depended on supplementing what was officially given. There are quirky details too, the sort of small human facts that keep history from turning flat. Archaeologists have found fragments of colonial, a handmade earthen pottery associated in many places with enslaved African and African American communities. These pots and bowls suggest familiar techniques adapted to new conditions. Imagine that for a moment. Even where metal pots clanged in the kitchen and imported goods travelled through colonial ports, people still shaped clay with practiced hands and made vessels that suited their own needs. It is not a grand rebellion. It is something quieter, a form held in the palm, a method remembered, a meal served in a bowl that carries more history than the people at the big house table could ever guess. Clothing offers little relief. Plantation-issue garments, when provided, are usually coarse and plain. Rough linen for warmer weather, woolens for cold months. The cloth scratches at the neck, chafes under the arms, and grows stiff with sweat, dirt, and repeated use. A shirt can rub the shoulders raw after long work. Trousers or petticoats pick up burrs, dust, and damp from the ground. A seam splits, and you feel it all day. Buttons go missing, hems fray. The body keeps moving inside fabric that never quite lets you forget it is there. Children may wear hand-me-downs so thoroughly worn they seem held together by memory. Adults patch knees, elbows, cuffs, and bodices with pieces cut from older garments or scavenged scraps. A needle is valuable, thread is valuable, cloth is valuable. Nothing useful is casually discarded by people who are denied enough. You sit with a torn sleeve in your lap, fingers pinching the fabric close in dim light, and mend it because tomorrow's work does not care that the cloth already failed yesterday. Shoes are another matter, and in some seasons, some people go barefoot, especially children, though not always by choice. Bare feet toughen with use, but tough is not the same as protected. Dirt cakes between toes, stones bruise the arch, stubble pricks, mud sucks at the heel. In cold weather, the ground can burn with chill. Where shoes are issued, they are often stiff, crude, and not built for lasting comfort. Leather pinches, seams bite, soles wear thin. Still, even poor shoes can feel precious when frost hardens the earth. Touch becomes a daily register of hardship. The collar that rubs, the damp hem against the shin, the cold board under tired legs, the straw tick that pokes through linen, the blanket, rough but welcome, laid over aching limbs. People in the modern world speak lightly of texture. In your world, texture can rule the mood of an hour. Winter is particularly cruel. Cabins may have cracks that invite the wind inside as if it pays rent. A fire helps, but fuel is never infinite, and smoke can gather thickly under a low roof. Your hands hover near the heat until the skin stings. One side of the body warms while the other stays cold. Wool holds warmth if you have enough of it, but many do not. Some sleep pressed close to others simply to hold on to shared heat through the night. Breath clouds the air. The blanket smells of smoke and old lanolin. You curl inward and hope the morning is not too bitter. Summer brings the opposite trouble. Heat presses down through the roof and lingers in the cabin after sunset. Clothes stick to skin. Mosquitoes whine near the ear. Fleas and lice can turn rest into a negotiation with itching. Sweat dries, then returns. The body cannot settle. In many quarters, sanitation is poor and close living conditions make discomfort constant. Privacy is scarce. Space is scarce. Air itself can feel scarce. Yet people seek dignity within these limits. They wash when they can, sometimes with lye soap harsh enough to roughen the skin, sometimes with water alone. Hair is tended with care, though tools and products are limited. Garments are mended not only to survive, but to remain presentable within the standards a community builds for itself. On Sundays or rare special occasions, people may put on better clothes, perhaps a kerchief tied neatly, a cap kept clean, a shirt saved from harder use. There is a quiet insistence in that effort. You may deny me comfort, it says, but not entirely my sense of self. Sleep should be the great repair, but it is often too thin for that. Cabins vary in size and construction, though many are small, cramped, and simple, built of logs, boards, or mud and clay materials depending on region and resources. Some have chimneys, some have only rudimentary hearths. Furnishings are sparse, a few stools, a chest if fortunate, pegs on the wall, maybe a table, maybe not. The floor may be dirt or rough planks. The sleeping arrangements are shared, improvised or crowded. A straw mattress sounds almost pleasant until you lie on one long enough to notice every lump and every shifting bit beneath you. Smell defines the space as much as sight does. Smoke clings to rafters. Damp earth rises from the floor after rain. Clothing carries sweat from the day's labour, cooked corn. Old ashes, wet wool, leather, and unwashed bodies settle into the room and stay. These are not shameful smells. They are the smells of survival under strain. But they are also the sense of a life without the luxury of distance from hardship. A strange feature of plantation records is how often owners carefully listed blanket distributions, cloth allowances, or shoe purchases as though these proved generosity. A man could count 2 shirts and congratulate himself. Colonial morality had a remarkable ability to trip over the obvious. The issue was never whether a rational garment existed on paper. The question was whether it met human need with any real adequacy. Usually, it did not. There were also regional differences in what people managed to eat or wear beyond issued supplies. Along the Chesapeake, fish, oysters, and small garden produce could supplement a diet when access allowed. In the Low Country, rice itself might appear at meals, along with fish or greens. In some northern colonies, where enslaved populations lived in towns as well as on farms, clothing customs and housing patterns could differ somewhat, but difference did not equal ease. Whether on a large southern plantation, a smaller farm, or an urban household, Black Americans in bondage were still expected to live on less than what their labour made possible. The body remembers all this in ordinary ways. Your stomach settles uneasily after a meal too small or too salty. Your shoulder eases a little when a torn seam is finally patched. Your feet throb once shoes come off. Your fingers search automatically for a warm cup, a crust, a dry corner, a folded cloth to use as a pillow. You become attentive to crumbs, to scraps, to any object that can soften life by 1 degree. Scholars continue to discuss how much autonomy enslaved communities had over food preparation and clothing modification in particular settings, because documentation is uneven and often filtered through hostile observers. But nobody seriously doubts that enslaved people invested labour, creativity, and care into improving daily life with the limited means available. These efforts were not decorative extras. They were essential acts of maintenance for body and spirit alike. At night, When the cabin settles and voices lower, comfort becomes a very small thing, and therefore a very meaningful one. A full spoonful, a dry pair of stockings, a place near the fire, a shirt that no longer scrapes at the neck because someone softened it through many washings, a child tucked under a blanket, a patched garment folded for mourning, a bit of rendered fat saved to flavour tomorrow's pot. These are not luxuries in the grand sense. They are the tiny victories of endurance. This is what life really feels like when the basics are never secure. Food is never just food. Clothing is never just clothing. Shelter is never simply a roof. Each becomes a daily test of improvisation, patience, and bodily resilience. You learn to measure value not by abundance, but by relief. Enough meal to quiet the stomach, enough cloth to shield the skin, enough warmth to sleep for a few hours without shivering. Enough. Always that modest, difficult word. And when enough cannot be reached, you do what people have always done under pressure. You stretch, you mend, you share, you save. You swallow hunger with dignity when you can, and anger when you must. Your life is constrained by deliberate deprivation, yet within that harsh narrowness you continue to feed bodies, cover children, repair fabric, tend fires, and make homes out of spaces never designed for human ease. There is hardship in every detail. There is also stubborn skill. By the middle of the day, the work itself is no longer the only burden. The greater weight is being watched. You feel it before you see it. A pause that lasts 1 second too long, a head lifting from the row, a hand resting on a tool handle while breath returns. In 1750, for black Americans held in slavery, labour happens under inspection so constant that even your posture can become evidence against you. Someone is always measuring effort, attitude, speed, obedience, or what they imagine those things should look like. The overseer may be near enough for you to hear the saddle leather creak when he shifts his weight, or perhaps he walks the rows, boots scuffing dry soil, a switch or whip hanging easily at his side. That ease is part of the threat. Violence does not have to be used every minute to shape behaviour. It only has to remain possible. The body learns to organise itself around that possibility. Your spine stays alert. Your eyes lower at the right moment. Your hands keep moving. Even when the wrists begin to ache with a hot, needling pain, watching changes the air around you. It sharpens it. You become aware of tiny things. The scrape of a hoe blade catching a stone. The rustle of leaves stirred by your sleeve. The click of a horse bit. The sudden silence when nearby conversation cuts off because footsteps have approached. Sound itself becomes a warning system. You listen with your whole skin. On large plantations, constant supervision helps keep the labour system efficient from the owner's point of view. On smaller farms, the eye of control may come directly from the owner rather than a hired overseer, but the effect can be just as exhausting. In some places, a driver, often an enslaved man forced into an intermediate role, is made to push others and report on work. That position can carry a little influence and a great deal of danger. It can divide a community. It can also trap a person between downward resentment and upward threat. Slavery loved arrangements that spread pain in several directions at once. You learn quickly that no movement is neutral. Standing still may be called idleness. Working too slowly may be called defiance. Speaking to another person while labouring may be called distraction. Even looking directly at the wrong person for too long can be recast as insolence. The rules are slippery because that makes them useful. If the rules shift, punishment can always claim to be justified. The worst part is that you often cannot tell where the line truly lies. It moves with mood, it moves with weather, it moves with the harvest, with the owner's debts, with the overseer's temper, with some private domestic annoyance you did not cause but may still suffer for. A man argues in the big house. Rain damages a field. A cart axle breaks. Suddenly the whole place tightens, and every command comes clipped and hard. You feel the change before anyone explains it, because your body has become a weather vane for danger. Historians agree that surveillance was central to slavery, but they continue to debate the precise balance between direct observation and indirect control across different colonies and labour systems. Records are uneven, and much depends on plantation size, crop, and local custom. Still, there is no serious doubt about the larger truth. Enslaved people lived under constant scrutiny, and that scrutiny was designed to keep labour flowing while crushing any sense of personal autonomy. In the field, you must perform exertion in ways that satisfy the watcher. There is technique even in this. Bend low enough to appear diligent. Keep the row moving. Do not wipe sweat too often. Do not straighten your back more than necessary. If you are clever, you find ways to preserve strength without making that preservation visible. A slower turn of the wrist instead of the whole arm. A step placed carefully to spare the knee. A brief breath taken while lifting, so the pause hides inside motion. Survival can look like 100 microscopic adjustments. Inside the main house, the surveillance is quieter but no less oppressive. Here the gaze judges manners as well as output. A servant carrying dishes must move smoothly, neither clattering nor stumbling. A maid brushing a coat must not miss a spot. A woman tending children in the nursery is expected to be attentive, patient, and nearly noiseless, even when tired enough to drift standing up. Faces are watched too. A neutral expression might be misread as coldness. A smile can be called presumptuous. Colonial households often demanded the impossible, then acted offended when impossibility failed to cooperate. The rooms themselves seem built for notice. Polished wood reflects light. Window glass catches movement. Metal gleams when it is clean, and shows neglect when it is not. You feel exposed in these interiors, where every tray, curtain, button, and floorboard can become a test. The smell is different from the field. Beeswax, cooked meat, damp wool, starch, lamp smoke, lavender, sweat hidden under perfume. None of it calms you. The more orderly the room, the more obvious any flaw appears. Some enslaved people developed remarkable skill in reading the emotional temperature of a household or work gang. A footstep on the stair, a throat cleared in irritation, the speed at which a door is opened. These tiny signals help you decide whether to speak, disappear, hurry, or become as unnoticeable as possible. It is a mental labour often overlooked in simple descriptions of slavery. The work is not only what the hands do, the work is also constant interpretation. There is a strange and grim intimacy in being watched this way. The people in power often notice your habits more than your humanity. They know who moves quickly, who tires early, who has a strong back, who favours one ankle, who can be trusted with horses, who knows how to salt pork, who has a singing voice, who can be sent on errands, who is likely to resist, who is pregnant, who is aging, who is ill. These observations are not tender. They are inventory mixed with suspicion. One quirky detail from surviving accounts is that some owners and overseers became obsessed with minute productivity comparisons. They might compare one worker's row length, one woman's spinning output, or one artisan's speed against another's, as though a plantation were a contest and not a human catastrophe. It is such a revealing habit. The people running these places often mistook domination for management skill. They were very proud of efficiencies that began with theft. Punishment hovers near all of this. It may arrive as shouted humiliation, withheld food, extra work, confinement, or physical beating. The exact forms vary, but the atmosphere they create is chillingly similar. You do not need to witness every punishment personally to be affected by it. Stories travel, scars travel, sudden silences travel. A child sees enough to understand that adults can be hurt for displeasing the wrong person. That lesson sinks deep. You notice how everyone manages their face. This person keeps the eyes low. That person answers quickly but not too quickly. Another becomes expressionless in moments of danger, as if the features can be shuttered like windows. Such habits are not natural masks. They are acquired protections. Over time they settle into the muscles. The mouth learns restraint. The shoulders learn submission without surrendering inwardly. The gaze learns to flick and withdraw. In some places, religion is used as another form of surveillance. Owners speak of obedience, duty, or divine order, picking through scripture like a thief choosing silver. Attendance at certain services may be monitored. Speech about salvation may be encouraged when it supports submission, discouraged when it suggests equality. Not every owner behaves in the same manner, and not every colony handles these matters identically. But the larger pattern is familiar. Institutions are bent to support control whenever they can be. There are moments when the pressure becomes almost surreal. Imagine kneeling to scrub a floor until your knuckles redden, feeling the wet wood cold through the cloth, hearing conversation above you as though you're a piece of furniture. Imagine standing with a tray while a guest talks about crops, trade, or horses, never acknowledging that the room functions because your arms are steady. Imagine pulling tobacco worms from leaf after leaf while sensing a rider behind you, not speaking, simply there. Surveillance turns ordinary acts uncanny. You are present and denied at once. Scholars still argue over how often enslaved people found blind spots within these systems of observation. On some plantations, dense work routines and large spaces surely created moments when direct supervision loosened. In urban households, movement through streets, docks, and markets could create other kinds of gaps. Yet blind spots were never freedom. They were chances to breathe, exchange words, save strength, pass information, or recover a little self-possession. That difference matters. Sometimes the most exhausting thing is the anticipation itself. You have not yet been corrected, but correction feels possible. You have not yet been accused, but accusation seems near. Your heartbeat changes when someone calls a name, even if it is not yours. Your hands tense when a horse stops behind you. The body can grow tired simply by bracing over and over again. Touch becomes part of the pressure. The shirt sticking between your shoulder blades in the rough seam under the arm. The handle digging into a calloused palm while you force your pace to remain steady. The heat of sunlight on the back of your neck, mixed with the colder sensation of being evaluated. It is a peculiar discomfort, almost impossible to explain to someone who has never lived under watch. You are physically hot and socially chilled at the same time, and yet, even here, people find tiny methods of self-protection. A muttered word passed without moving the lips, a warning glance when danger approaches, a song hummed softly enough to sound like work rhythm rather than communication, a child redirected before wandering into sight. These are modest acts, nearly invisible, but they matter. Under surveillance, care often has to disguise itself. The day drags onward, and concentration frays. That is when risk rises. Fatigue makes tools slip, buckets tip, trays rattle, horses startle, words come out wrong. The watcher interprets these errors as moral flaws instead of what they usually are, which is human weariness. Slavery had very little patience for human limits. In that sense, it was both cruel and absurd. It demanded the output of machines from bodies that bled, ached, sweated, and grieved. Toward late afternoon, the light grows slanted and softer, but scrutiny does not necessarily ease. Sometimes it sharpens as tasks are counted and compared. Has the row been finished? Has the wash been hung? Has the kitchen been put right? Has the woodpile risen enough? Numbers, impressions, judgments. The day ends not when your body says enough, but when authority decides the account is satisfactory. This is one of the hardest truths to sit with. Slavery did not only force people to work, it forced them to live inside the gaze of others who believed themselves entitled to evaluate every gesture, every breath, every sign of strain. It tried to turn observation into ownership. It tried to make the person under watch feel permanently exposed, permanently readable, permanently available for correction. But no gaze ever fully reaches the inner life. It can punish bodies. It can provoke fear. It can distort speech and movement. Yet it still fails to see everything. Behind the lowered eyes, behind the careful posture, behind the practiced neutral face, thought continues. Judgment continues. Memory continues. The watcher sees labor. The watcher sees compliance, or what looks like it. The watcher rarely understands the full human being standing a few feet away, enduring the inspection and quietly refusing to become only what is being measured. The workday does not erase family life. It crowds it, strains it, and threatens it, but it does not erase it. In 1750, black Americans held in slavery still fall in love, still raise children, still worry over fevers, still argue softly in the dark, still laugh when something ridiculous breaks through the gloom. The tragedy is not that family disappears. The tragedy is that family must survive inside a system built to interrupt it at any moment. You return toward the quarters with tired legs and a mind that has not fully unclenched. The air has cooled a little. Smoke drifts low from cooking fires. Voices gather in patches. A child runs, then slows when an older hand catches a shoulder. Somewhere a baby cries with the sharp, offended force only babies can manage. Somewhere else a woman calls a name twice, then a third time in the tone that means supper is ready or nearly ready, or had better be appreciated if it exists at all. These sounds matter. They are the sounds of attachment. They are ordinary, and that is exactly why they are important. Marriage under slavery has almost no legal protection. A man and woman may consider themselves husband and wife. Their community may recognize the bond, and in some cases an owner may approve or even arrange a ceremony. Yet the law does not reliably defend that union as it would for free white colonists. The people who claim ownership over your labour may also claim the power to separate spouses by sale, transfer, inheritance, debt, or whim. A family can be treated as a cluster of assets rather than a unit of love. That knowledge never really leaves you. It sits behind domestic life like a draft under the door. You may see a woman lift a pot from the fire with one hand while steadying a child with the other. You may watch a man mend a broken stool after labour because a household still needs somewhere to sit. You may hear young people whispering near the cabins, trying to carve out a little privacy in a place that offers almost none. Courtship exists, though often in fragments, a walk after dark, a few exchanged words while carrying water, a glance held for one heartbeat longer than safety recommends. Romance under slavery has terrible logistics. On some plantations, husbands and wives live in the same quarters. On others, they may live on different properties and see each other only on Sundays, at holidays, or through stealthy visits at night. These so-called abroad marriages were common enough in many places, especially where labour needs or ownership patterns kept families divided by distance. Imagine the effort of crossing muddy roads, woods, or fields after a full day's work just to spend a few hours with the person you love. Knowing dawn will send you back again. It is both heartbreaking and deeply impressive. Love can be stubborn in very inconvenient ways. Historians broadly agree that enslaved people formed enduring family bonds despite legal vulnerability, though they continue to debate how best to interpret household structures in places where records are incomplete or distorted by the perspective of the owners. Some documents list people only as first names in inventories. Others describe kinship loosely or not at all. The archive is stingy with tenderness. Yet the evidence that survives from testimony, naming patterns, burial practices, and community memory makes one thing clear. Family was central to life under slavery, even when the system denied its legitimacy. Children bring joy and fear in equal measure. A baby's soft cheek, a toddler's wobbling steps, a little hand reaching for yours after a long day. These things can brighten the hardest evening, but a child in bondage is also a child exposed to hunger, illness, labour, and eventual sale. Parents know this. Grandparents know this. Older siblings know this. Care is shot through with dread. You see it in small habits. A mother checking a child's breathing in sleep. A father teaching caution in whispers. A grandmother saving the tenderest bite for the youngest mouth. An older sister tying a kerchief, fastening a button, smoothing a forehead, or tugging a little one out of the path of danger with brisk, practiced love. Family labour is its own shift, unpaid in every sense, and yet morally priceless. A cabinet evening is crowded with need. Food must be finished, clothes need mending, wounds want tending, children need washing, calming, feeding, or settling. The room smells of smoke, damp cloth, cornmeal, and tired bodies. Firelight touches faces in warm orange flashes. Shadows jump on the wall. The spoon knocks softly against the pot. Someone hums. Someone sighs. Someone laughs at a remark too dry to be cheerful and too funny not to appreciate. Even under strain, households have texture. One quirky historical tidbit is that naming practices in enslaved communities could carry subtle meanings invisible to owners. Children might be named for relatives, for admired figures, for days of the week in traditions with African roots, or in ways that preserved family memory outside formal legal recognition. A name could be inheritance when almost nothing else could be securely passed down. It is a beautiful and painful thing to consider. The ledger may reduce a person to a line item, but within the community, that person can still belong to a chain of memory. Touch becomes especially meaningful in family life because so much else is unstable. A hand on a shoulder, fingers combing a child's hair, a sleeping infant curled against a chest, two adults leaning together in rare quiet, cloth tucked around small legs against the cold, a gentle tap of warning when a child is about to speak too loudly. These gestures can say what the setting does not allow people to declare openly. You are mine in love, I am yours in care. We are still here. Older people hold a special place when they are allowed to remain within the household or nearby community. Age under slavery can be precarious because usefulness is measured cruelly, but elders often carry stories, practical skills, herbal knowledge, songs, kinship maps, and remembered names. A grandparent may know who belongs to whom when paperwork does not care. A grandmother may teach a child how to strip greens, wrap cloth, sit quietly, or listen for adult moods. An older man may carve a toy, patch a roof, settle an argument, or tell a story in a voice worn smooth by years. These are forms of wealth no owner can fully calculate. Yet the threat of separation hangs over everything. A debt comes due, an estate is divided, a child is lent out, a spouse is sold. A widow loses the small stability she had because property is being redistributed after a death in the owner's family. Slavery turns every family event in the enslaver's household into a possible disaster in the enslaved one. Births, marriages, inheritances, relocations, and business failures in the big house can ripple outward with terrifying force. You can feel this uncertainty in conversation. Some topics are handled lightly because the heavier version is too painful. People ask where someone has gone. People say perhaps he will return. People say perhaps she will be sent back after harvest. People say perhaps. That word carries far too much labour. Children are often the first to reveal the emotional weather of these fears. A quiet child grows clingy. A lively one goes silent. A question is asked too often. Is Mama coming back tonight? When will Uncle return? Why is everyone whispering? Adults answer as best they can, which is to say imperfectly, honesty is cruel, false hope is cruel, silence is cruel. Slavery made parents choose between cruelties no parent should have to manage. Some owners encouraged family formation to promote stability and reproduction within the labour force. It is an ugly sentence, but a necessary one. Sentiment and management could overlap in highly disturbing ways. An owner might praise marriage, allow ceremonies, or prefer households with children, not because he respected family autonomy, but because stable domestic ties could reduce flight, organise labour, and increase future property. Colonial paternalism often wore a gentle face over a calculating mind. That combination has spoiled many histories. Historians still argue over how much freedom enslaved couples had in choosing partners under particular circumstances, because evidence varies sharply by region and by owner. Some matches were clearly self-chosen and deeply rooted. Others were pressured, manipulated, or complicated by distance and power. The emotional landscape was wide, but the governing fact stayed the same. The final authority over family life did not belong to the family. And still, people built one. They built it in the evening meal divided carefully among bowls. They built it in the lullaby sung low enough not to attract irritation. They built it in the joking complaint about somebody who tracked mud indoors again. They built it in the way a boy sat close to an elder to hear a story, pretending not to be interested while clearly hanging on every word. They built it when two adults shared the day's burdens without speaking them fully aloud, because both already knew. They built it when a child was scolded, then pulled gently into an embrace moments later. Family is often most visible in repetition. The atmosphere of the quarters after dark can hold both affection and grief at once. Firelight flickers, the smell of wood smoke settles into blankets. Night insects sing outside. A door shifts on its hinge. Someone nearby coughs. Someone else murmurs a prayer over a sleeping child. In another cabin, a couple may be speaking in low voices, planning how to stretch rations, where to hide a small item, how to visit a relative on another property, how to keep hope alive without feeding illusion too generously. Domestic life is made of such conversations. It is not grand. It is intimate and necessary. A particularly painful reality is that children are never simply children in the eyes of the system. They are future labourers, present burdens, vulnerable dependents, and in the cold arithmetic of slavery, valuable increase. That thought would poison any parent's peace. To hold a baby and know others may be counting not only its breaths but its future prices to inhabit a level of moral horror that polite history sometimes smooths over far too much. Yet children also create resilience. They give adults reasons to teach, protect, joke, save, and endure. A little girl practicing steps with oversized shoes, a boy asleep before finishing a supper, chin falling to chest, two children sharing a scrap doll or a carved toy. These scenes are not sentimental decorations. They are evidence that life keeps insisting on itself. No family under slavery can afford to forget danger, but no family can survive emotionally by staring at danger every minute either. So people fold care into daily acts. They braid hair, they patch clothes, they warm food, they soothe fevers, they teach manners, songs, cautions, and names. They tell children who their people are. In a world determined to make identity unstable, that lesson matters enormously. This is what family life really looks like in 1750 for many black Americans in bondage. Not a peaceful domestic scene protected by law, but a fragile, fiercely maintained network of love under threat. The danger is constant, yes. So is the devotion. Each meal prepared, each child comforted, each spouse awaited, each elder listened to, each name remembered becomes part of a quiet declaration. We belong to one another, even here. We remain people to each other, even when the law refuses to see it. And in that insistence, there is both sorrow and extraordinary strength. Night arrives, but rest does not arrive with it. That is one of slavery's meanest little tricks. The fields dim, the yard grows quieter, the sky turns violet and then black, and still the day is not finished with you. In 1750, many black Americans held in bondage discover that darkness simply changes the kind of labour expected. The body, already thinned by daylight work, is asked for more. Someone always needs tending, something always needs fixing. A household cannot pause just because your muscles have begun to tremble. The evening air may feel cooler now, carrying the smell of damp soil, wood smoke, and the faint sweetness of crushed grass. Crickets start their steady music. Frogs call from low, wet places. A breeze moves through the trees with a soft, restless sound. Nature seems to be settling. Human demands are not. You reach the quarters or the kitchen yard, and the next shift begins almost at once. Supper still has to be prepared or finished. Water must be carried again. Fires need feeding. Children need washing, calming, untangling from quarrels and tears. Clothes must be patched, stockings darned, tools cleaned, shoes checked, scraps saved, leftovers covered, ashes managed, corners swept. The work of staying alive has 1,000 small teeth, and at night they all bite together. For women especially, though certainly not only for women, evening labour can feel endless. After hours spent in fields, dairies, kitchens, wash spaces, or spinning rooms, many still return to cook for their own households, mend clothing, care for the sick, and settle children. The hands that hoed rows now stir pots. The back that bent over tobacco or rice now bends over a baby. The feet that crossed the yard all day now pace a cabin floor to soothe a feverish child who refuses sleep. This is not a second life. It is the continuation of the first, only more private and somehow more urgent. The fire becomes the centre of everything. You crouch close enough to feel heat sting your shins while smoke rises into your face and clings to your hair. The iron pot simmers. Cornmeal thickens with slow, heavy bubbles. A wooden spoon scrapes the bottom in a soft circular rhythm. Grease hisses faintly if meat is in the pan. The smell is modest, but welcome. Even plain food becomes precious after a day when the stomach has been pulled tight by work. Children drift in and out of the circle of light, One rubs tired eyes with dusty fists, another falls asleep sitting up, then jerks awake in annoyance. A baby fusses against a shoulder warm with the day's sweat. An older child may be set to shell peas, fan the fire, fetch a cloth, rock a cradle, or keep a younger sibling from tumbling into trouble. Under slavery, childhood often includes responsibilities far earlier than gentler worlds would allow. A small pair of hands becomes useful quickly. Domestic tasks after dark are shaped by scarcity as much as by duty. A torn shirt cannot simply be replaced. It must be mended by candlelight or firelight, the needle moving through rough cloth while tired fingers miss and prick themselves. A broken strap must be tied, patched, or somehow persuaded to hold another day. A cracked pot handle may need wrapping. A blanket may need shaking free of ash and laid out carefully because there is no spare. Every object is pushed beyond ordinary life expectancy. The people using those objects are, too. Historians know that enslaved households spent enormous effort on these nighttime labours, though the exact rhythms varied from place to place. Surviving records often notice the major work of the plantation and ignore the quieter work of maintenance done in cabins and backspaces. Yet testimony, account books, and material evidence all suggest the same broader truth. The official workday was only part of the burden. Much of the labour needed to keep a family clothed, fed, and functional happened in the hours that should have belonged to rest. There is a deep weariness in doing careful tasks when your body wants only stillness. Threading a needle becomes an act of concentration. Washing a child's face with a damp cloth becomes a negotiation with drooping eyelids and soft complaints. Stirring the pot requires standing a little longer than your knees would prefer. Lifting water one more time makes the shoulders flare with dull pain. Fatigue turns every simple motion into a small hill. A curious detail from archaeological and documentary evidence is that many enslaved households made creative use of reused materials. Pieces of broken ceramics might be repurposed. Cloth scraps became patches, ties, wrapping, or makeshift toys. Bones could be shaped into tools or buttons. Nothing useful was casually abandoned. Frugality here was not a lifestyle preference. It was a discipline pressed into daily life by deprivation. There is something almost astonishing in the level of ingenuity people drew from so little. The cabin at night has its own atmosphere, different from the harsh openness of the day. Firelight moves across walls in a reddish pulse. Shadows swell and shrink as someone shifts between the flame and the wall. The room smells of smoke, damp cloth, cornmeal, old straw, and human nearness. Outside, the night is cool and wide. Inside, the air is close. Boards creak. A pot lid clicks as steam escapes. Someone coughs in the corner. Someone mutters at a stubborn knot in thread. A child, finally asleep, lets out the long, soft breath of surrender. If someone is ill, the whole rhythm changes. Fever at night carries a special dread. The skin is too hot under the palm. The breathing seems wrong. The room feels tighter. Water is fetched. Cloths wrung out. Herbs prepared if available. Prayers spoken under the breath. Enslaved communities often relied heavily on their own knowledge of remedies, drawing from African, indigenous, and European traditions blended through experience. Owners might summon a doctor when valuable labour was threatened, but everyday care more often came from the people already in the cabin, the yard, the quarters, the community. Scholars still debate the precise transmission of certain healing practices, because the documentary record is patchy and often filtered through outsiders who misunderstood what they saw. But there is broad recognition that enslaved people maintained practical medical knowledge about plants, poultices, childbirth, and ordinary illness. These skills were not romantic relics. They were essential tools of survival in a world where formal care was inconsistent, self-interested, or entirely absent. Night also creates narrow spaces for personal tasks that daylight would never permit. Hair can be braided or rewrapped. A spoon can be carved a little further. A pocket can be stitched into a garment. A bit of food can be hidden for morning. Someone may quietly count days or remember names. Someone may whisper plans about visiting a loved one, trading for something needed, or avoiding a trouble that seems likely to rise. These are modest acts, but they return a small measure of intention to live so often directed by others. Sometimes, in certain places and under certain owners, There may be nighttime work demanded directly for the plantation or household itself, grain to process, laundry to finish, extra food preparation for guests, child minding in the big house, emergency labour after weather damage, a horse gone lame, a fence broken, a task left incomplete. Slavery had a remarkable gift for discovering new ways to treat exhaustion as unfinished business. This is especially hard on pregnant women and mothers of infants. Historical evidence suggests many women worked long into pregnancy and returned to heavy labour soon after childbirth. Then came nursing, carrying, waking, calming, cleaning, and feeding, all threaded through the larger demands of plantation life. Imagine sitting near the fire after a day of field labour with a baby at the breast, your back burning, your head nodding, your hands still not done for the night. The infant needs warmth. The pot needs watching. Another child is crying. Sleep waits at a distance like a person who changed their mind about visiting. There is also laundering, which sounds plain until you remember what it asks of the body. Water must be hauled. Garments must be soaked, rubbed, wrung, and spread or hung. Lye soap can bite the skin. Damp cloth slaps cold against the forearm. In cooler weather, the wetness makes the fingers ache. In hot weather, steam and sweat combine until breathing feels thick. Clean clothing is not a decorative luxury in crowded conditions. It is part of health, dignity, and endurance. Men, too, often spend the evening in repair work beyond the day's assigned labour. A stool leg needs pegging, a roof leak wants plugging, a fishing line must be checked, a harness piece needs mending, a crude toy might be carved for a child. Firewood must be split or stacked. On some properties, men hired out or assigned to skilled work could come back late and still face these household duties. Exhaustion rarely respected gender. It only changed costume. One thing the historical record makes clear is that evenings could also hold moments of social exchange, even amid labour. People talked while shelling peas, while braiding hair, while mending. Information moved in low voices. News from another plantation, a birth, a death, a rumour of sale, a bit of gossip about the owner's family, a warning about patrols, a joke sharp enough to release a little pressure. Humour often survived in very dry form. People with almost nothing still found ways to mock the vanity and foolishness of those above them. It was a subtle pleasure, and perhaps one of the healthier ones available. The challenge was always time. The candle burns down, the fire settles, the body slows despite all effort. The child must finally be laid down. The needle must be put away before it disappears in the straw. The pot must be scraped out. Hands must be wiped on an apron or rag. Ash must be banked so morning can begin a little more easily. Even preparation for dawn belongs to night. You are already serving tomorrow before this day has really let go of you. A small but telling detail from plantation life is how often enslaved people had to create order in spaces and schedules never designed for their comfort. Bedding rolled and unrolled, cooking done in cramped quarters, shared rooms arranged so several activities could happen at once. One person sewing while another stirs the pot, while another hushes a child, while another checks a blistered foot in the firelight. It is choreography born from pressure. Nobody would call it graceful from the outside, but it is skillful all the same. Night can feel tender for a few minutes, though there are moments when the labour briefly loosens. A child is finally asleep, mouth slack with peace. The pot is empty enough to suggest everyone got a few bites. The fire has dropped to a steady red glow. Someone leans against the wall and closes tired eyes. The crickets outside keep time. The air cools across your wrists. In such moments, the body almost remembers what it means to be still. But even that stillness is uncertain. A cough may return, a baby may wake. Rain may begin through a leaking roof. Someone may knock softly at the door. Somewhere on the property a command may come, and with it another demand. Rest exists, but it is thin, conditional, and easily interrupted. The people in power do not merely take labour from daylight. They reach into the evening and take from that as well. This is what darkness really means in 1750 for many black Americans living in bondage. Not a clean ending, but a shift in duties. The public labour of fields, yards, workshops, and kitchens gives way to the private labour of repair, feeding, nursing, cleaning, calming, and planning. The body that has already been spent must keep spending itself, and yet, within those nighttime hours, people also preserve life in the most literal sense. They warm food, tend children, stitch cloth, cool fevers, bank fires, and make one more night possible. It is exhausting. It is ordinary. It is one of the clearest signs that endurance is not passive. Endurance works. Even in a world designed to grind the spirit down, the spirit proves inconveniently difficult to crush. That is one of the quiet miracles of life under slavery. In 1750, black Americans held in bondage are surrounded by commands, shortages, threats, and constant labour. Yet they still find ways to pray, sing, laugh, remember, and resist being reduced to tools, not loudly, not always safely, and not in ways outsiders would necessarily notice. But the inner life does not simply vanish because power wishes it would. The evening settles deeper now. Firelight softens faces. The sky outside is thick with dark, and the stars, where clouds allow them, seem very far away. Crickets keep their patient music. A night bird calls from somewhere beyond the quarters. Smoke threads upward through the cool air. This is the hour when voices can grow lower, slower, and more thoughtful. Bodies are tired, but sometimes tiredness loosens the tongue just enough for truth to come out in murmur rather than speech. Faith lives here in many forms. Some people carry Christian beliefs shaped by preaching, scripture, or baptism in the colonies. Others preserve elements of African spiritual traditions, whether openly, quietly, or in blended forms that do not fit neat categories. Many live with both memory and adaptation at once. That mixture matters. Slavery did not create a blank slate. People arrived with cosmologies, moral frameworks, ritual habits, protective beliefs, and ancestral ways of making sense of suffering. Those ways changed in America, of course. They had to. But they did not disappear simply because owners preferred obedience with a hymn attached. You might hear a prayer spoken softly over a sleeping child. The words simple and direct. Keep him safe. Let her wake strong. Let this fever break. You might hear scripture quoted by someone who has only partial access to literacy but full access to memory. You might hear a phrase repeated from a sermon, reshaped gently in the mouth until it speaks more to human dignity than to colonial order. Religion, like everything else, is contested territory. Owners sometimes encouraged Christianity among the enslaved, especially when they believed it would promote submission. Yet this was never the whole story. Once religious language enters a community, it can travel in directions power did not intend. A story about deliverance can start sounding dangerous. A line about all souls before God can become unsettling. A song about crossing over can carry several meanings at once. The people at the top may hear piety. The people below may hear endurance, justice, or a longing for release. Historians continue to debate how widespread formal Christian practice was among enslaved people in 1750, especially before the full expansion of evangelical revivals later in the 18th century. Regional differences were real, and documentation is uneven, but there is strong evidence that spiritual life in enslaved communities was rich, varied, and not easily controlled by the intentions of slaveholders. That uncertainty about exact form only sharpens the broader fact. Human beings kept seeking meaning. Song is one of the clearest ways that meaning survives. Not every song is grand or solemn. Some are rhythmic work tunes, some are lullabies, some are playful, teasing, sly, and full of double edges. A melody can steady breathing. A repeated line can make labour more bearable. A shared tune can tell you that the people around you are still people, not merely bodies in motion. Even humming under the breath can be a declaration of self. Sound travels differently at night. A low voice carries softly through thin walls or across a yard. The crackle of the fire leaves spaces between its pops. In those spaces, a song can feel almost suspended in air. Perhaps it begins with one person, then another joins quietly. The notes are not performed for applause. They are used. They hold the room together. They soothe a child. They ease a mind. They remind listeners of language, rhythm, sorrow, and hope all braided into one thread. Some of these musical practices carry deep African influences in rhythm, repetition, call and response, and the use of song as communal experience rather than polished display. Scholars still discuss the exact pathways of these musical continuities, because evidence from 1750 is fragmentary and often filtered through outsiders who lacked the vocabulary to describe what they heard. But most agree that African expressive traditions shape the soundscape of enslaved life in lasting ways. Even when the archive mumbles, the rhythm still speaks. A quirky but revealing detail from early accounts is that white observers sometimes remarked on the singing of enslaved people without understanding it at all. They noted the sound, the energy, or the strangeness to their ears, yet missed the function. This happens often in history. Power sees expression and mistakes it for entertainment, but a song can be structure, memory, coded feeling, or simple medicine for the exhausted mind. Laughter belongs here too. Dry laughter, sideways laughter, the kind that escapes when someone imitates an owner's vanity just enough to make trusted listeners snort into their hands. Humour under oppression is not trivial. It can be one of the few safe ways to puncture the false greatness of those who demand awe. A ridiculous wig, an overfed gait, a pompous phrase, a horse that plainly has more sense than its rider. People noticed these things. Of course they did. Tyranny often looks absurd up close. The laughter is careful. Though, it stays among trusted company. It lives in a corner, in a muttered imitation, in a glance exchanged at exactly the right moment. Too much openness can be dangerous. Yet even quiet humour changes the emotional weather of a room. It reminds you that domination has not conquered perception. You still know foolishness when you see it. That knowledge is oddly nourishing. Then there are the smaller acts of refusal that rarely appear in formal records with their full meaning attached. Taking a little longer than demanded when it can be hidden. Preserving family names. Teaching a child something the system does not value. Passing on a remedy. Keeping a treasured object. Meeting for prayer outside direct oversight. Saving food. Warning someone about danger. None of these acts end slavery, but each interrupts the total claim that slavery tries to make over time. Knowledge and identity. Resistance in 1750 does not always look like open revolt, though revolts and plots certainly haunted the imagination of slaveholding societies. More often, daily resistance is woven into ordinary life. A woman may keep back a scrap of cloth to patch her child's garment instead of surrendering every usable piece to plantation need. A man may feign misunderstanding to protect someone else from a harsher task. An elder may teach a story with moral force hidden beneath its calm surface. These acts are modest, they are also morally significant. Historians broadly agree on the importance of such everyday resistance, though they still argue about where to draw the line between survival, adaptation, and intentional defiance in specific cases. That is a fair question for scholars. Real life is not always tidy enough to label. A gesture can be practical and resistant at the same time. A song can soothe and signal. A prayer can console and critique. Human behaviour under pressure rarely arranges itself into neat categories for future academics, which is honestly one of its more charming habits. Stories have power here as well. At night, after labour, a tale can travel from one mouth to another and carry more than amusement. Animal stories, trickster stories, moral tales, fragments of remembered histories, cautionary accounts, and clever fables all have their place. A strong story teaches timing, judgment, patience, and the possibility that the weak may outwit the powerful. No wonder they mattered. Imagine the scene. A child leans against an older woman's knee, trying not to fall asleep before the ending. Firelight flickers across her face as she speaks. The room smells of ash, cloth, and cooling food. Outside, the dark presses against the cabin wall. Inside, the story opens a mental space where wit matters, where arrogance is punished, where survival belongs to the clever. It is not escape in the childish sense. It is instruction wrapped in imagination. Objects, too, can hold spiritual or emotional significance. A bead tucked away, a polished shell, a strip of cloth, a carved figure. Archaeologists have found small items in some enslaved living spaces that may have served decorative, protective, or symbolic roles. Interpretation is often uncertain, and scholars are cautious for good reason. Still, it is clear that material life among the enslaved included things valued for more than bare utility. People kept what they could because people always do. Meaning likes to settle into objects. The atmosphere of these nighttime gatherings, even very small ones, can feel fragile and precious. One person braids hair while another hums. Someone else speaks of a verse, a dream, or a sign. A grandmother corrects a child gently. A man seated near the wall rubs at a blistered palm while listening. There is fatigue everywhere, but also attentiveness. Nobody needs to announce that these moments matter. The care taken with them says enough. There is risk in all of this. Gather too openly, and suspicion may rise. Speak too boldly, and words may travel. Pray in the wrong company, sing too freely, laugh too loudly, preserve the wrong object, trust the wrong person. Slavery does not only regulate labour, it attempts to regulate connection. That is why connection itself can become quietly subversive. Some communities created hidden or semi-hidden spaces for worship and reflection, whether in cabins, woods, edges of fields, or other places offering brief shelter from direct supervision. The exact forms varied, and evidence for 1750 is not always abundant, but the pattern of seeking private spiritual space would become deeply rooted in African American life. The need is obvious. A soul does not flourish under inspection. The body, meanwhile, is still present in all this. You feel the rough floor under your feet, the heat of the fire fading and returning in waves, the ache in your shoulders when you shift position, the softness of a child's hair under your hand, the dryness of your throat after a day's work and a little singing. Spiritual life is not happening somewhere above the body. It happens through breath, voice, touch, rhythm, and shared presence among bodies worn by labour. That is what makes it so powerful. The same body forced to toil can still pray. The same throat ordered into silence can still sing. The same mind crowded by commands can still form a joke, remember a story, or speak a truth in careful company. Slavery tries to colonize the inner world, but the inner world proves difficult terrain. This is what faith, song, and quiet defiance look like in 1750. Not always dramatic, rarely safe, often half-hidden and easily misunderstood by those outside it, yet unmistakably real. People seek God in ways the powerful cannot fully script. They sing to soften grief and strengthen one another. They laugh at foolishness to keep perspective. They pass stories, names, gestures, and meanings from hand to hand and mouth to ear. In a system built to reduce human beings to labouring property, these acts insist on another truth. You still think. You still feel. You still belong to a world larger than the one trying to cage you. And sometimes, in the low music of the night, that truth becomes almost audible. By now, the body has been asked to do too much for too long. That is the plain truth. In 1750, for many black Americans living under slavery, illness is never just illness, and aging is never just aging. A fever threatens labour. A swollen joint threatens labour. A difficult birth threatens labour. A cough, a cut, a fall, a rotten tooth, a bad winter, a hungry season, a summer full of mosquitoes. All of it presses on the same merciless point. Can the body still be used? If yes, it is pushed. If no, its suffering is often treated as inconvenience. You feel this reality in the smaller pains first. The blister that opens again before it has closed. The back that tightens each morning sooner than it did last year. The knee that resents damp weather. The shoulder that burns after lifting. The tooth that throbs when you drink cold water. These are ordinary troubles in any hard life. But under slavery they become more dangerous because rest is scarce and treatment is uncertain. A body that cannot recover is asked to continue anyway. The climate deepens the strain. In the Chesapeake, Hot summers can turn the air thick and heavy, with insects rising from fields and low ground. In the rice districts of the lower south, standing water, marsh air, and mosquitoes make disease a constant companion. Fevers can move through a plantation with dreadful ease. Chills seize the body, then heat follows like fire under the skin. Sweat soaks the shirt, then dries in patches. The head grows light. The eyes ache in the brightness. Yet unless you are visibly unable to stand, there may still be work to do. Malaria, dysentery, respiratory illness, intestinal infections, skin complaints, injuries from tools, complications of childbirth, and chronic pain all shape enslaved life more than polite old histories once liked to admit. The archive often notices only dramatic outbreaks or labour losses. It is less interested in the daily misery of bodies wearing down, but the evidence is there in plantation records, bills for medicine, burial patterns, and later testimony. Sickness was not occasional. It was woven into the landscape of labour. Historians still argue over the exact mortality patterns in some regions and periods, because records can be incomplete, manipulated, or focused only on plantation accounting rather than lived experience. But there is broad agreement on the larger picture. Disease, malnutrition, overwork, dangerous environments, and inadequate care combined to make health precarious for enslaved people across colonial North America. You can smell illness in a cabin. Sweat that is too sharp, breath that has turned sour and shallow, damp cloth laid across a forehead again and again, a pot of herbs steaming gently near the fire, smoke mixing with fever heat. The air feels heavy, almost sticky with worry. Someone turns restlessly on a pallet. Someone nearby whispers a prayer. A child is told to keep quiet and fails, because children do not understand why fear changes adult voices. Most care comes from within the enslaved community itself. Women especially, though not only women, often carry deep practical knowledge about herbs, poultices, teas, cooling cloths, bleeding, bone setting, childbirth, and how to nurse a sick person through the night. This knowledge can draw from African traditions, indigenous-influenced colonial practice, and local experimentation. Survival teaches hard lessons, then hands them on: a leaf, a root, a bark, a compress, a way of wrapping, a way of waiting, a way of watching breath. These things matter. A quirky but telling detail from early America is how often white households relied on enslaved healers while still denying them full respect. A woman might be trusted to manage births, fevers, or herbal treatments within a plantation community, and even consulted by whites in moments of need, yet remain legally unfree and socially degraded. Colonial society had a very flexible relationship with hypocrisy. It could depend on a person's knowledge and deny that person's humanity before supper. Childbirth is one of the clearest places where bodily strain and communal care meet. Pregnancy under slavery rarely excuses women from demanding labour for long. Many work deep into pregnancy, their backs already burdened, their feet swollen, their energy stretched thin. Then labour comes, often in simple quarters with limited supplies, attended by other women whose skill must substitute for what formal medicine cannot or will not offer. The smells are close and intense: sweat, blood, herbs, smoke, warm water if it can be heated. The room is hot, breathing is loud. Hands press, hold, wipe, steady, catch. Birth can bring joy, relief, terror, grief, or all four at once. A healthy baby survives the night. A mother survives. Everyone exhales. Or complications come. The labour lasts too long. The bleeding does not stop. The child struggles. The mother weakens. In any century this would be dangerous. Under slavery, the danger is sharpened by overwork, poor nutrition, inadequate rest, and a system that values the newborn in ways that are morally chilling. A child is loved by family and counted by property law. Those realities can exist in the same room, which is enough to make the soul feel unwell. Infants and young children are particularly vulnerable. Diarrheal diseases, fever, poor nutrition, unsafe housing, cold snaps, and simple bad luck can take them quickly. Parents know this too well. That is why care can seem almost vigilant to the point of pain. A cough is listened to carefully. A forehead is touched again and again. A child who sleeps too long is checked. Another who will not sleep is rocked until the arms ache. Love under these conditions often looks like alert exhaustion. The old are also vulnerable, though old age itself can be a slippery category in a world of hard labour. Some people in their 40s or 50s may already look worn far beyond their years. Teeth are missing, hands are thickened and bent, gait has stiffened, eyes have narrowed against sun, smoke and strain. The face carries work in its lines. A person may not be considered elderly by years, but the body has already travelled a great distance. When an enslaved person grows less able to perform heavy labour, their treatment depends on the place, the owner, the available family support, and the perceived usefulness of lighter tasks. Some are assigned childcare, gardening, spinning, cooking, poultry tending, or watching smaller children. Others are neglected or regarded as burdens. Slavery had no built-in respect for age. Any kindness shown to the old came from individuals or community bonds, not from the system itself, and yet older people often hold tremendous authority within the quarters. Not legal authority, of course. Something more meaningful. They know names, kin lines, births, deaths, remedies, habits, dangers, and stories. They have watched patterns repeat. They have opinions, often sharp ones. An elder may sit by the fire rubbing a swollen hand, then quietly identify the herb for a stomach complaint, the family connection between two children, the reason a certain owner's mood should not be trusted, or the sign that weather is about to turn. Knowledge settles in such people the way warmth settles in a blanket. Slowly, deeply, usefully. Scholars still debate how best to reconstruct the lives of older enslaved people, because records often become vaguer as their market value declines. That fact alone says something brutal. The archive grows dim where the ledger loses interest. But archaeology, plantation inventories, and scattered testimony suggest that elders remained important within family and community life, even when the formal record looked past them. Injury is another constant shadow. A fall from a wagon, a cut from an axe, a burn from a pot, a crushed finger in a workshop, a horse kick, a twisted ankle in a furrow, a sickle slice. These accidents are common in any labouring world. Under slavery they are harder to heal because work resumes too soon. A wound reopens, a sprain never sets right. A burn scars thickly because clean dressing is hard to maintain. The body becomes a map of old damage layered beneath new damage. Touch tells the story. Thick scar tissue under the fingertips, a ridge along the forearm, a knee that grinds when bent, a hand that no longer fully closes, the soreness in the lower spine after a cold night, the tenderness in a woman's abdomen after childbirth, while she's expected back at labour before full recovery. People carry their medical history in motion, long after the moment of injury has passed. There are also the injuries done by punishment, though people do not always speak of them directly in every setting. Bruising, welts, torn skin, lasting weakness, fear attached to certain movements. Violence does not end when the mark fades. The body remembers through flinch, posture, guarded breath. Trauma settles into muscle as well as mind. One small but poignant historical detail is the presence of improvised supports and adaptations. A walking stick cut to the right height, cloth wrapped around a tool handle to ease the grip, a favourite stool near the hearth for someone whose legs fail early in the evening, a child taught to fetch water for an older relative. These adjustments reveal community care in action. Nobody writes a grand speech about them. They simply happen because someone notices someone else is hurting. The night around sickness feels different from ordinary night. Crickets still sing outside, but their music seems farther away. The fire is watched more closely. The room holds fewer jokes. Water is lifted in careful sips. A wet cloth is wrung and laid down again. A mother dozes upright beside a child. A daughter supports an elder's shoulders so he can drink. A neighbour steps in with broth or herbs. The labour of care becomes slow, repetitive, and intimate. Sometimes the sick recover. Fever breaks in sweat, and the face cools. A child asks for food. A man gets to his feet carefully and insists he is fine a day before anyone believes him. A woman, pale and weak after birth, manages a small smile when the baby finally settles. Recovery under slavery can feel almost miraculous, not because illness is inherently mystical, but because the surrounding conditions make healing so fragile. Sometimes recovery does not come. Death is close in every era of the past, but under slavery it is shaped by special cruelties. A loved one dies after too little rest, too little food, too much labour, too little protection. Grief must then fit around the work schedule. Imagine that indignity. The body is buried, the mourning is constrained, and the field still expects attendance. Yet communities remember burial customs, whispered prayers, kept names, and remembered places all push back against erasure. This is what illness, age, and worn bodies mean in 1750 for many black Americans in bondage. Not occasional misfortune, but a constant negotiation with pain, depletion, and uncertainty. The body is pushed because it can be. It is neglected because others profit from denial. And still, within cabins and quarters, people tend one another with skill that's practical, emotional, and deeply human. They cool fevers, catch babies, support elders, wrap wounds, prepare herbs, share stools by the fire, and watch through the night for signs of change. The system sees labour capacity, the community sees a person. That difference, quiet as it may seem, is the beginning of mercy. By 1750, the control around you is no longer loose, accidental, or improvised. It is becoming increasingly organised, written down, enforced, and defended by people who prefer to call theft a legal system. That is the chilling part. Slavery in colonial America does not survive only through whips, shouting, and daily habit. It also survives through statutes, patrols, courts, passes, property records, and a growing racial order meant to make bondage look natural. You live not only under a person's power, but under a whole framework designed to keep that power standing. This framework reaches into movement first. Where can you go? When can you go? Who gave permission? Can you leave the plantation, farm, yard, or house without a pass? Can you visit a spouse on another property? Can you carry goods to market? Can you attend worship? Can you gather after dark? Can you walk a road without being questioned? Every step outside assigned space becomes vulnerable to scrutiny. Freedom of movement, something many people hardly think about until it is threatened, turns into a heavily monitored privilege you do not possess. The roads themselves can feel watchful. At night, the trees lean over the path in dark shapes, and the air smells of damp leaves, mud, and cooling earth. Your shoes scuff softly if you're lucky enough to have shoes at all. If you move quietly, every sound seems louder. A twig snaps, a dog barks in the distance, a rider passes somewhere beyond the bend. These ordinary noises become charged when patrols exist to stop, question, and punish black people for being in the wrong place or moving without permission. Slave patrols and informal watches develop unevenly across the colonies, but the broader pattern is unmistakable. White communities organize to monitor black movement, prevent escape, break up gatherings, and reassure themselves that the system is secure. In some places, these patrols are especially tied to fears of rebellion, theft, or flight. In others, local militias or constables play overlapping roles. However the arrangement is structured, the effect is similar. Black mobility is treated as a threat to be contained. Historians still debate the exact reach and consistency of patrol systems in specific colonies by 1750 because local practice varied and surviving records can be patchy. Some areas were more formally organised than others. Yet there is broad agreement that legal and extra-legal surveillance of enslaved people intensified over time, especially in colonies with large enslaved populations and deep white anxiety about resistance. That anxiety tells you something important. People do not build systems of constant watch unless they know, somewhere underneath their justifications, that the arrangement they defend is unstable. Laws shape daily life even when you do not know every word in the code. You feel them through consequence, a meeting broken up, a pass demanded, a punishment justified, a marriage ignored, a testimony refused, a child inherited as property. The law may appear abstract when written on paper, but in your life it arrives as a very physical force. It can separate a family, deny a complaint, authorize a beating, or declare that one person's oath counts while another person's does not. By mid-18th century, many British colonies in North America have developed extensive slave codes or related legal practices that define the status of enslaved people, restrict behavior, and sharpen racial hierarchy. These codes can regulate assembly, movement, weapons, trade, testimony, and punishment. They often distinguish sharply between black and white, free and enslaved, in ways meant to harden social boundaries. The message is not subtle. Power intends to make difference permanent. The cruelty of the law is not only in what it forbids, it is also in what it presumes. It presumes that black people must be managed, that white people must be protected from them, that bondage can be inherited, that violence can be administered as discipline, that the economic claims of owners outweigh the human claims of the enslaved. Once such assumptions enter legal language, they begin to reproduce themselves: a courtroom, a county office, a sheriff, an estate division, a parish register. All can help translate prejudice into procedure. You see the results during moments that should belong to ordinary human dignity. A person dies, and the estate inventory lists human beings beside livestock, furniture, tools, and acreage. A debt must be settled, and bodies become assets to be assigned or sold. A child is born, and the child's status follows the mother into bondage. That last rule is one of the most efficient brutalities slavery ever invented. It turns reproduction into property increase. It lets a system grow itself. One deeply unsettling detail in colonial legal culture is how often officials spoke in dry, administrative language about intensely personal violence. Human lives were categorized with the calm tone usually reserved for barrels, landlines, and tax questions. Bureaucracy has a gift for making horror sound tidy. It is one of civilization's least attractive talents. The law also reaches into speech. In many places, black testimony against whites is restricted or excluded in court. This means harm can happen in full view of the victim, while the victim's own voice carries reduced legal weight. Imagine the insult of that arrangement. You can be punished by a system that does not fully recognize your word within it. Silence is manufactured, then interpreted as absence. This legal imbalance deepens white power at every level. A white neighbor, patrolman, overseer, or owner can make accusations with confidence that the system is inclined to believe him. An enslaved person, by contrast, enters any dispute with fewer protections from the start. Even free black people often face serious legal restrictions, suspicion, and unstable rights. This is how racial hierarchy grows beyond slavery alone. It begins to shape the entire social order. You can feel that hierarchy in gestures as much as in formal statutes. Who steps aside on the road? Who removes a hat? Who may look directly at whom? Who speaks first? Who answers? Who waits? Everyday customs help train the body into the logic of rank. Children learn it early, both black and white, though in very different ways. One group is trained to fear power, the other is trained to expect deference. Neither lesson is innocent. Scholars continue to debate how uniformly colonists understood race in the modern sense by 1750, since ideas evolved across time and place. Ethnicity, religion, labour status, and ancestry all intersected in complicated ways. But there is no doubt that colonial societies were increasingly constructing a durable racial order in which blackness was closely associated with enslavement, inherited inferiority, and legal vulnerability. The language, categories, and local practice could vary. The direction was grimly clear. Trade restrictions reveal another layer of control. In many areas, enslaved people need permission to buy, sell, or exchange certain goods. This matters because trade can create small zones of independence. A chicken sold, a basket traded, fish exchanged, vegetables brought to market, cloth acquired. money saved in tiny amounts. Authorities often worry about such activity, not only because it complicates ownership, but because it allows relationships, information, and initiative to develop beyond direct supervision. So even a market can become a tense place. It smells of produce, animals, sweat, fish, and mud. Voices rise in quick exchanges. A woman haggles. A child stares at some small item with longing. A white customer glances too long or not at all. An enslaved seller must balance opportunity with caution, speaking just enough, moving carefully, keeping track of what belongs to whom and what must not be noticed. The chance to trade can help sustain life. It can also attract unwelcome attention. Control extends to literacy as well, though the degree varies by region and period. Formal prohibitions become stronger in some places later, but even where not fully codified, access to reading and writing is often discouraged, denied, or tightly controlled. Knowledge can travel dangerously, a written past can be forged, a Bible verse can be interpreted independently. A letter can carry feeling and information beyond the watcher's reach. People in power do not usually fear ignorance. They fear minds that can connect, and yet learning still happens. A child memorizes a word. Someone traces letters in ash, dust, or on a board. Someone listens closely while a white child studies nearby. Someone keeps numbers in the head with astonishing accuracy. Knowledge, like water, has a habit of finding cracks. One quirky and revealing pattern in colonial records is the repeated white obsession with gatherings. Dancing gatherings, funerary gatherings, night meetings, work pauses that look too social, religious meetings not directly overseen. Lawmakers and local officials often worried that black people assembling might produce conspiracy, disorder, or escape. That fear can sound paranoid, and often it was. But it also reflects a truth the ruling class understood better than it liked to admit. When people gather, they share ideas, comfort, plans, and courage. Patrols, passes, laws, punishments, property documents, racial customs, testimony rules, market restrictions, inheritance practices. All of these work together. That is what makes the system so durable and so exhausting. You are not dealing with a single cruel individual whose bad temper ruins your day. You are dealing with an entire architecture that tries to anticipate your movement, limit your speech, define your status, and absorb your labour into its legal and economic logic. Even the landscape seems altered by this structure. Roads are not just roads. They are routes of surveillance. County lines matter because jurisdictions matter. Churchyards, courthouses, docks, ferries, market squares, and plantation gates all become points where authority can ask who you are and who claims you. Space itself is divided according to power. A gate is never just a gate when it marks the edge of controlled movement. Touch, again, registers the truth. The folded pass hidden in a pocket or not granted at all. The grip of a patrolman on an arm. The weight of a hat removed in forced deference. The stiffness in the back when standing before a magistrate or owner. The coarse paper of an inventory that can decide a family's fate. Law is often imagined as words. In your life it is also pressure on the skin, distance travelled under fear, and the physical sensation of being stopped. Still, systems of control always contain cracks. They must. A code can be bent, delayed, ignored, or strategically misunderstood. A patrol can be avoided. A message can pass quietly. A meeting can happen in a place not easily watched. A garden can grow a little beyond what was intended. A memory can survive any statute. None of this means the system is weak in a simple sense. It means human beings are never fully governed by the fantasies of those who write the rules. That is why the rules have to keep multiplying. This is what life under control really means in 1750. Not only the visible labour and punishment, but a dense web of law and racial ordering meant to stabilise theft across generations. The aim is larger than obedience in one moment. The aim is to make domination routine, respectable, inheritable, and enforceable by neighbours, patrols, priests, courts, and clerks alike. It is a chillingly complete project. Yet even within that project, people continue to move, gather, teach, trade. Remember, love, and think in ways the system never fully masters. The law can organize power. It cannot fully extinguish personhood, however hard it tries. Morning or noonfan and night have all asked the same thing of you. Give more, give strength, give speed, give obedience, give silence when silence is safer, give speech when speech is demanded, give the body until it feels hollow, then keep giving. That is what daily life in 1750 often means for black Americans held in bondage. Yet there is one thing the system keeps failing to understand. A person can be overworked, watched, underfed, threatened, and still remain a person. Exhaustion is real. Domination is real. So is the stubborn fact of inner life. You wake again because that is what survival requires. The body rises with the familiar ache in the back, the heaviness in the legs, the hands already rough before work begins. The air is cool at first, carrying the smell of damp ground and old smoke. Somewhere nearby, a child turns in sleep. Somewhere else, someone coughs into the dark. The day is waiting, and it does not care whether you're ready. But you rise anyway, which is its own quiet statement. Not heroic in the grand painted sense. Something harder from something more ordinary. Persistence. The colonial world around you would like to pretend that bondage has reduced human beings to labouring units arranged neatly inside a profitable system. The ledgers support that illusion. The laws support it. The routines of plantation life support it. Yet everyday reality keeps producing evidence to the contrary. People love too deeply, remember too carefully, joke too sharply, grieve too honestly, and adapt too creatively to fit the category of property. The category remains violent. It also remains false. You see this in how people carry memory. A name passed to a child, a songline held for years, a recipe shaped by what is available and what is remembered, a way of tying cloth, a story told after dark, a warning repeated in just the same words. The official world may not record these things properly, but they are still history. In some ways, they are the most important history, because they reveal what people chose to preserve when everything else was unstable. Memory can live in the body as much as in the mind. Hands know how to braid, sew, plant, you stir, wrap, soothe, carve, and heal because other hands taught them. Feet know the path to water in the dark. Ears know which footstep brings trouble. Shoulders know how to carry loads in a balanced way. The mouth knows a prayer, a joke, a child's name, a tune soft enough for safety. Knowledge travels through repetition until it seems almost physical. That is one reason slavery feared community. Community remembers what domination once forgotten. Historians still argue over many details of colonial black life in 1750 because the surviving record is uneven, often hostile, and too frequently written by people with power over others. That uncertainty matters. It keeps careful scholars humble. But uncertainty in the archive does not mean uncertainty in the larger truth. The broad reality is unmistakable. Black Americans in bondage created families, beliefs, customs, practical knowledge, and shared meanings inside a system designed to deny all of those things full legitimacy. The human record is often stronger than the written record. You sense endurance not as a noble abstraction, but as a set of daily choices made under pressure. Get up, share the food, patch the shirt, tend the fever, learn the mood, hide the hurt when necessary, speak kindly to a frightened child, save the scrap, carry the water, hold back a little strength for tomorrow, keep one thought private, pass one lesson along. Endurance is not a speech. It is a pattern of actions repeated until they form a life. There is a risk in talking about resilience. Of course, one must not turn it into a soft glow that makes oppression look bearable. Nothing about slavery is redeemed because people endured it with courage. The system remains brutal. Bodies still break. Families are still threatened. Hunger still bites. Fear still sits in the room. Yet it would be equally false to speak only of suffering and never of the capacities people brought to surviving it. Endurance is not a gift slavery gave. It is a strength people exercised against slavery's demands. One curious detail in the study of enslaved life is how often the material remains of daily existence reveal care where written sources show indifference. A repaired bowl, a carefully arranged hearth, beads kept in a cabin, a buried object placed with intention, a garden plot tended near quarters. Such traces are small, but they speak clearly. Human beings were making meaning, not just spending labour. They were shaping environments as best they could. They were leaving impressions of value in places the powerful barely noticed. You also see endurance in language. Even where literacy is restricted or absent, words still carry inheritance. The phrases used to comfort children, the nicknames that make a hard evening lighter, the warnings given about roads, patrols, or temper, the names of herbs, the descriptions of kin, the little sayings that make work feel shorter. Language builds a shelter of its own. Thin shelter, perhaps, but real. A person in bondage may have almost no recognized legal claim over time. Labour, movement, spouse, or child. Yet within the cracks of that condition, claims still exist in practice. This child is yours to protect, whatever the law says. This elder is yours to honour. This song is yours to keep. This grief is yours to feel. This memory is yours to pass along. The system can interfere with all these claims. It cannot fully erase the human insistence behind them. The senses tell the story once more. Smoke in your clothes from 100 fires. The ache in your palms from wood, rope, iron, and hoe handles. The smell of cornmeal, greens, sweat, and wet earth. The coolness of dawn air before the heat builds. The roughness of patched cloth against skin, the weight of a sleeping child against the shoulder, the murmur of prayer in a dark room, the dry humour shared in a whisper. Life is made of these textures as surely as it is made of statutes and labour systems. Colonial America often congratulates itself on order, growth, and prosperity. It likes to look at estates, exports, roads, churches, markets, and polished dining tables and call that civilization. But when you stand close to the lives that support all of it, the picture changes. Prosperity is revealed as dependence. Refinement is revealed as extraction. Order is revealed as coercion carefully arranged. The most disciplined bodies in the colony are often the least free ones. That contradiction runs through the whole society like a crack in glass. And yet the people at the centre of that contradiction are not passive figures frozen inside someone else's system. They act, decide, interpret, protect, mourn, teach, improvise, and endure. A mother adjusts a blanket around a child with absolute tenderness. A father returns from labour and still finds the patience to mend a small stool. An elder offers advice that saves a younger person trouble. A woman remembers the useful plant for a fever. A man reads danger in a voice before it becomes open threat. A child laughs, sudden and bright, over something so small it would be missed by anyone not paying attention. These are not decorative details. They are evidence of a people still exercising humanity under attack. Some enslavers noticed pieces of this and misunderstood what they were seeing. They saw diligence and called it loyalty. They saw song and called it cheerfulness. They saw family life and called it stable management. They saw skill and called it value. What they often failed to recognize was the moral depth beneath these surface observations. Diligence could be survival. Song could be medicine. Family life could be resistance to erasure. Skill could be stolen brilliance. The eyes of power are not always good readers. Scholars continue to ask important questions about how enslaved communities balanced adaptation with resistance, how African cultural inheritances changed over generations, and how much variation existed across colony, crop, and household. Those questions matter, because they prevent history from flattening into cliché, but the broad human lesson remains steady. Life under slavery was not a blank field of suffering without texture. It was a crowded, difficult, morally intense world where people had to build personhood under pressure every single day. That pressure did not vanish with sunset. It lived in the muscles, in the startle response, in the hunger that returned too soon, in the grief that could not be displayed safely, in the fear of sale, in the careful management of expression. But pressure also produced skills of attention and solidarity. People learned how to read one another quickly, help quietly, and preserve dignity in forms small enough to survive. A warning glance, a shared morsel. a repaired hem, a remembered story, a seat by the fire offered to someone older. These things might look modest from the outside. Inside the life, they are immense. There is also something else growing in these daily acts, though nobody in 1750 can fully see its future shape. Memory is accumulating, not just personal memory, but collective memory, habits of care, styles of speech, religious creativity, musical patterns, food traditions, family structures, survival knowledge, and hard judgments about power are all being formed, tested, and transmitted. This does not make the suffering acceptable. It does mean the people living through it are not leaving the world empty-handed. They are carrying forward ways of being that later generations will inherit, transform, and recognize as their own. One of the most moving truths about this history is that humanity often appears most clearly where the system expected it least. In the cabin rather than the ledger, in the whisper rather than the order, in the garden patch rather than the market account, in the lullaby rather than the law, in the scarred hand that still reaches to comfort someone else. Empires and colonies like to imagine that power defines reality. Daily life often proves otherwise. So what was life really like for Black Americans in 1750? It was exhausting. It was dangerous. It was full of labour, uncertainty, and calculated deprivation. It was structured by violence and guarded by law. It burdened women, men, children, and elders in different but connected ways. It narrowed comfort, strained health, and threatened family life. All of that is true, and it must be spoken plainly, but another truth belongs beside it. Life was also full of intelligence, adaptation, attachment, belief, humour, memory, and care. People did not live as shadows inside the system. They lived as human beings constrained by it, contesting it in ways large and small, and refusing in countless daily acts to become only what the system said they were. That refusal did not always shout. Often it barely rose above a murmur. But it endured. As night deepens, the fire lowers to red. The room quiets. A child shifts in sleep. Someone near the wall exhales slowly, the kind of breath that comes only when the tasks are finally done for a few hours. Outside, the insects keep their patient rhythm. The air is cooler now against tired skin. You sit with the ache of the day still in your limbs, and with it the knowledge that tomorrow will ask much the same. Yet within that hard knowledge is another one, quieter and stronger. You have carried more than labour through the day. You have carried a self, a family, a memory, a way of seeing the world, and a will that no ledger ever managed to total correctly. The night holds you gently for a moment. The smoke softens. The darkness settles. The body, however worn, is still your body. The breath, however tired, is still your breath. And in that simple fact, there remains something slavery can wound, but never fully own. The sounds grow softer now. The fire gives a last faint crackle, then folds inward on itself. The room is warmer near the hearth, cooler by the wall, and every sleeper finds some small arrangement with blanket, straw, or folded cloth. Outside, the trees stand still in the dark, and the road beyond them disappears into shadow. Nothing needs explaining anymore. The labour, the hunger, the care, the watchfulness, the love, all of it settles into silence. You let the silence grow. In that quiet, the faces of the day lose their strain. The hard lines soften. A child breathes evenly. An elder shifts once, then becomes still. A mother rests her hand where she can feel the warmth of the little body beside her. A father's tired shoulders finally loosen. The night does not erase sorrow, but it places a softer cover over it for a while. The way ash settles over embers and keeps a little heat alive until morning. The air smells faintly of smoke, old wood, and cooling earth. Somewhere far off, water moves through reeds or along a muddy bank with a sound so soft it almost feels imagined. The crickets continue their steady song, never hurried, never concerned with ledgers, orders, or law. Above the roof, beyond the dark and the trees, the sky stretches wide and patient. You do not need to hold the whole history awake anymore. You can let the details drift. The fields blur, the roads fade, the tools grow quiet. What remains is something simpler and calmer, human warmth near a fire, a hand resting in trust, a voice once raised in song now sleeping, breath in, breath out, night surrounding the cabin like a dark blanket drawn carefully over the world, and as the last thoughts loosen their grip, you are left with one gentle truth. Through all the hardship, people remained people. They cared, endured, remembered, and loved beneath the weight of a cruel age. That truth stays warm in the dark. Let the room grow still. Let the voices settle. Let the embers dim. And let sleep come softly now. Accept all.